Wonderful Fuse Box, our favourite, well, my favourite place for creative technologists in South East England. It's nice and beautiful here. It's lovely to be back for the Future Festival. This one is the third in our series of conversations around immersive technology and the live music industry specifically, curating the wonder of a real-life festival and how, well, we're going to hear lots of stuff about this magic joining point, interplay, messy edge, grey area between real physical live stuff and what virtual reality and what online streaming have all done to that industry and that sector. This event is all part of the 5G Festival alternative stages. So we're running in conjunction with the 5G Festival, which is being put together by the Dome and will happen in spring next year, Omicron willing. I'm Chris Thorpe-Tracy. I'll be your slightly off-kilter host for the evening. Tonight we have three people to talk with you. First, we'll hear from Phil Jones. We're in Phil Jones's house. Phil is in charge, the big chief of Wired Sussex, which runs the Fuse Box. We'll then hear from Anna Moulson, who is the MD of Melting Vinyl and has been pioneering live, real life, but also streamed events at St George's Church. Melting Vinyl is one of the longest running independent promoters across, well, really across the whole country. I was going to say across South East England, but Anna has done incredible work with live music and has been an absolute, I was going to call you a tent pole. That's probably like a bedrock or a tent pole, some euphemism like that about supporting live grassroots music in this town for over 2 decades, 2 decades-ish. And then we'll hear from Matthew Shaw, who is a board member at Sea Change and co-runs the Sea Change Festival with Rupert Morrison of the Drift World down in the southwest, and they've done enormous, amazing work as well. What I'll do after all three people have spoken with you is I'll bring up Matthew and Anna, and we'll have our typical conversation, Q&A. So questions from the floor will be welcome, but in this audience, we do tend to have quite an informed audience with people with direct personal experience as well. So I know normally at these sort of events, they say, oh, keep your questions to just questions and no comments, but this evening comments are totally welcome. I sort of think of you as an audience of experts, so that would be great. We're just having a conversation, all thoughts welcome, and then we'll bring it to a close. I imagine we'll be here for about an hour and a bit. Maybe less if things roll quickly. So to start us off, the wonderful Phil Jones is here. I will leave the floor to you, Phil.
Thanks very much, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm just really here to introduce a short excerpt from a much longer interview that I did with someone called Michael Williams. Michael is a researcher at the University of Brighton. He couldn't be here tonight, which is why I recorded an interview with him. And I guess when you're thinking about putting on virtual or immersive music concerts, there's two things that I think are probably true. One is that a virtual immersive music concert or festival really is not the same thing as a live physical concert. They are different things. And two, but unless you understand what makes a live concert impactful, effective, and wonderful, then you can't really think about how you make virtual festivals effective for audiences too. And really it's that latter thing that I was talking to Michael about, because Michael does research into rock concerts. Probably one of the best things that any university researcher could look into. And he's done a lot of work with U2 to look at what goes into the planning of their concerts, what makes them effective, what they think about, and how they engage the audience in different ways in those concerts. The total length of the interview that I did with Michael a couple of weeks ago is about half an hour, and we'll be posting it, I hope, on our YouTube channel, the Wired Sussex YouTube channel, tomorrow. But what I want to show you now is just a 5-minute excerpt from that, and it was a part of the discussion when I was talking to Michael about spontaneity, because as he said, you know, any U2 concert is a huge logistical exercise where everything has to be very, very planned. But, as he was saying, actually, really great concerts have a strong degree of spontaneity in them as well. And so he was talking about how that works. So, Chris, in the old-fashioned language, can you roll VT, please?
In terms of the concerts themselves, I drew upon an idea of managed spontaneity. With a show like U2's 360, I mean, a lot of it is queued up in advance. The guitar changes, the set changes, the set list itself is quite rigid, and so but the sort of those moments of managed spontaneity where the band, you know, do something sort of slightly different from the previous night, or you know, they perhaps change the set list altogether. I mean, the set list parties that I referred to earlier, fans very much scrutinise set lists, and you know, and look for those songs that perhaps, you know, that sort of don't get much of an outing in the set, that the band throw in every now and again, and it's those moments, or even parts of songs that are serendipitous, when seemingly Bono will sing a few lines that he would only sing on certain nights, and those few lines have become legendary amongst the fan community, and they're real talking points, and I think they also act as a draw. Of course, people want to go and hear those particular moments within the set. So there's those sorts of aspects of managed spontaneity, and there's an element of that. But then within the fan community, there's also the sort of fan meetups around the concerts. So, I mean, I've been to several concerts in different cities where, you know, quite often there will be an event the day before with fans meeting up, and then they'll meet up on the day itself, you know, in sort of either in the lineup. And it's like a family reunion, and sort of, you know, and the surprise there in terms of people having made it, you know, from the other side of the world, that have trekked all the way to Dublin or wherever. So there's those sorts of aspects within the fan community themselves as well. And there are a number of fans I know that, you know, have sort of set up their own fan groups and have become almost sort of celebrities in their own right, you know, that people now refer to those fans as being people that to look for knowledge about the gigs, where to get a ticket, those sorts of things. So I think in terms of, you know, things to think about in terms of the virtual environment is perhaps, you know, how those things can be, you know, because obviously there are lots of fans that aren't able to travel.
Yeah.
Those fans that can actually engage in those things that are perhaps facilitated more. I think, you know, often these things are facilitated by the fans in a sort of an unofficial cultural aspect to the event. But I think actually what U2, I think, have tried to do is sort of understand that and in a way capitalise on that, but also to be able to facilitate that sort of engagement with the fans. You know, I'm aware other bands also do the same, but I think they've perhaps always been seen as pioneers in terms of their live shows, in terms of, trying to innovate using technologies. And I think this is one other aspect where I think the band tried to sort of engage. So their 2015 tour, they invited sort of super fans from all over the world. At one point in the concert they did in Paris around the time of the Bataclan attacks, when they went back to perform there, they had about 10 super fans on stage that were all known to the die-hard fans, and they invited this group up onto stage, and it was a real sort of family reunion in a way, but a way of connecting with fans across the world.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, it makes me think of approaches that other bands have taken to increase the spontaneity or introduce spontaneity into, an event which, as you said, it is often very structured. There's a set list, there's huge artists have to come in, there's lighting rigs that go up and stuff like that. I'm trying to remember, but was it Elvis Costello who did a tour where he just took requests from the audience and then would play that, so that is really handing over the power of spontaneity to the audience, because he doesn't know what they're going to ask for. And a slightly different example, but back in the day, the Grateful Dead would encourage people to pirate. First of all, encourage people to come early and hang out outside and create tent cities outside the gigs, and then encourage them to pirate the gigs themselves and record directly off the sound desk in order to cascade the music out there. So it's quite interesting that some bands find mechanisms in order to make the audience more powerful in the environment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that recognition that actually, a show on its own without that level of engagement is, I think, as Willie Williams mentioned, it's quite an empty, hollow spectacle in terms of not having that sort of level of meaning for the fans and that level of engagement. And so, I think in terms of engaging fans in the virtual realm as well, I think there's opportunities, I'm sure, to expand this out to a much wider audience. And I'm interested in this interaction between the fans. I wrote about community, the idea of community. The YouTube community, as I imagine other fan communities, sort of tends to simmer away continually. And obviously during the build-up to a tour and the tour itself, it sort of comes to a boil, all of that activity, and it brings in the wider sort of more casual fans who also get drawn into it. But I think that activity in between times, I think, is quite important to capture and to understand, what goes on in those sort of fan communities. That, the meetups. I think there was a meeting about 3 weeks ago of U2 fans in Dublin. They had tribute bands playing there. They had their own sort of venue that has become a venue specifically for these events. And so, knowing all of that, and understanding how to sort of how to communicate with the fans and how to and how to engage them in the shows, I think is hugely valuable. And I think many bands are really good at this. And as you say, this is not a new phenomenon. Bands like the Grateful Dead and others before them have sort of have sort of recognised that. But I think the challenge now, is to try and sort of understand this at different levels, in sort of smaller gigs as well. We've all got access to technologies now that not just seen as a marketing sort of a way of marketing concerts, but a way of actually building a sense of belonging to that particular artist and a connection, which I think is really valuable.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks, Phil. And it's good to hear from Michael Williams. I did think during that, it's really fascinating that his example is U2, but it's worth thinking that that kind of really intense fan engagement also exists really right down through the music industry, including artists we might think of as quite small or like cult artists, and definitely aware of really intense like fan engagements and fans putting on their own events and using YouTube in exactly the same way for artists that if you went and saw them in the real world, they'd only play to a few hundred people. So it is very pervasive, isn't it? It's really good. Both our two coming speakers have a huge amount of experience of the curation side and of the organisation side of live events. So let's hear from Anna Moulson now. Absolutely fantastic person who has, I'm not going to use another stupid metaphor, no. The MD of Melting Vinyl, Anna Moulson.
I don't know how I feel about being called one of the oldest promoters around. I'm just going to put this on timer because I've been up north recently, so my capacity to talk has increased. And I know how it can be quite distressing to some of you Southerners, so I'm going to start going. So I'm just going to remember what Chris said about using this. It goes down. So what is streaming? You know, I think that there's quite a lot of young people that I teach at BIM about event management, and they feel quite allergic to it, really. They don't feel it's for them. And I just wonder if it really is for them, and we'll kind of talk a bit more about that as we go along. But it is really, if you think about it, the kind of best seat in the house, isn't it? Because when our previous kind of history of streaming is watching football matches, isn't it? And it's also watching Glastonbury. And within that, you get great production, great sound, and also really good sort of camera angles. So that seat thing is really quite important, really, isn't it, too, unless you've got an artist with a guitar right in front of you, but more well-produced streams. Someone said to me, well, it is kind of, you know, if it's pre-recorded, it's kind of a mixture of a live event and a pre-recorded event, isn't it? Because it's produced and hopefully it's well-produced. Someone said to me in lockdown, well, it's quite a social, isn't it? It's my way of socialising now, because there's that kind of chat element, isn't there? And there's, you know, people forget that it can be quite interactive. I think that is very much a third way. You know, we've got audio, we've got live, and now we've got streaming as well. And, you know, it is a new product, and we should treat it like that, really, when we consider who the audience is. So this is what I really wanted to do. You know, lockdown happened March 2020, and I thought, right, you know, I was so used to being in control, being a promoter and kind of planning my own kind of future when it came to my business. And that control was kind of taken out of my hands. And I just thought, I've got to find a way forward with this, and I've got to start understanding sort of streaming and how it works. And I've got to do it on a kind of bigger scale. You know, and I thought, well, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to be, you know, like the Union Chapel gig with Laura Marling, really well produced, great setting. You know, I can do this. And it was like trying to finish a Rubik's Cube. You know, I really couldn't quite get there. I couldn't get my head around it. You know, where do I fit in this kind of new scenario? How do I understand that kind of technical side of it? What roles do I need to involve? So I went back to the beginning of Melting Vinyl. I went back to my grassroots, which was quite, in the end, quite cathartic for me. It was really good for my mental health because, you know, 20-odd years ago, I was putting on itchy, scratchy artists at the, which is not, you know, it's no diss. It was really good fun. DIY kind of artists at the Freeboot in Brighton, if anyone remembers that venue. And it was, you know, there was no agents involved, and sometimes all these layers of different people that you deal with as a promoter do kind of delay things a bit. Obviously, it means that you can kind of earn money sometimes when you're dealing with an agent, but, you know, it felt nice just to be dealing directly with the artists. You know, a lot of the artists I asked were from Brighton, and but the first one was actually from outside of Brighton, and it's an artist called Roxanne de Bastien. And she really got herself together, and she said, you know, this was April 2020 when everything was kind of happening. You know, I'm going to organise a virtual tour, and I'm actually going to include promoters, which in this scenario, grassroots artists and also, you know, more well-known artists can kind of cut us out of the equation, really. And she said, you know, I'm going to do a virtual tour. I'm going to do Bristol and London and Leicester and Brighton, and you can be my Brighton promoter. And it did take me a while to get my head around what I needed to do. You know, on the day I was like thinking, there's no rider, there's no venue to deal with. You know, the artist is in control of the technology. It was live from her studio. But it was a nice introduction because it felt a little bit different to a live gig because she interacted with people. You know, there was a bit of a sing-along at the beginning of the night before it all started. She pretended to go out of the room with her guitar on her back, and it was filmed as if she was going to the Brighton gig. But it was a good sort of introduction to it, and it got quite good take-up, and I think it was just where we're at in terms of lockdown and the amount of people we had in terms of their attention. So there isn't, I'm sure you know this, but there isn't a lot of money in streaming, not at the moment anyway. Maybe at the higher end where you've got your Laura Marlings and your Nick Caves. But at this level, you know, it is very much kind of donations only. And some artists have really kind of used it to good effect in terms of, you know, rather than say, buy a ticket to my show, you know, buy me a cup of coffee or, you know, a tip jar kind of scenario. So we did donations only, and we did, you know, through the chat and the beginning of the night, have our sort of PayPal details on. Again, we didn't earn much money, but you know, it kind of covered it washed its face really. It was, you know, like I say, a chance for me to also kind of keep Melting Vinyl's brand out there, and you know, also just keep in contact with my audience base, because I've got a lovely loyal audience base that's been coming along to my gigs, some people for like 20 odd years. So that chat function on streaming was good to just see people kind of popping up. And also it was my opportunity to try kind of lesser known artists. So the one in the top right hand corner is an artist called Tiny Leaves, and he's got a lovely studio in, I think, Shropshire. And he set it all up, and it was, you know, really nice background. So there are sort of elements of streaming where if you set it up right, if you include, you know, a bit more value to it, that it can be, you know, a new product on its own. So, you know, with these shows, with these kind of artists, with Tiny Leaves, who we had in the far right-hand corner, you know, normally he probably would pull about 20 or 30 people in Brighton. And that stream, I think, alone got about, I think it was maybe about 600. I mean, obviously, it kind of stays there on the video element. These were all through Facebook, of Facebook. But that's a lot more, you know, a lot more views than you would get in an in-person gig. By the way, these are available to watch on Melting Vinyl's Facebook. So St George's, well, you know, I really needed to find a way forward to be working in the industry that I knew, and also, you know, keep Melting Vinyl out there. And also I'm involved in St George's in the sense that I hire it out to other promoters in non-lockdown kind of times. And I'd never applied for Arts Council funding before. I'd never had the time. You know, it's a really intense job being a promoter, and you're either kind of, you know, on full pelt putting gigs on, or you're kind of recovering during Christmas and the summer. So I did apply, and I was successful, and I was really pleased about that. And, you know, I just wanted it to be something for Melting Vinyl, to keep us out there, our name out there, something for my mental health and the other people who are working on its mental health. And also, you know, just to reintroduce the church again, to relaunch the church, and give grassroots artists that normally don't get that opportunity to play there. Normally it's kind of touring artists. You know, so there's this whole wealth of amazing performers in Brighton who maybe come along as punters, and quite a lot of them did. But now they got a chance to, you know, normally an artist like this would be possibly supporting a larger act if they got the chance. But within this scenario, you know, they got sound check time. They got an hour to do their show. They had a really good, strong team, and I've got a little video to show you where the team talk about their experience as well. So it was really nicely produced. It was pre-recorded. Unfortunately, it was during summer when we actually got the funding and had to carry out the shows. So you can imagine there wasn't a brilliant turnout. Probably about, you know, when I look back at them, anything from 50 to 300 views. But the first one we did a pilot before we applied. And this was a band called Insides, and that was in deepest, darkest lockdown in January of this year, would it have been? Yeah, I'm trying to remember where we're at. And we got, we sold tickets, and we sold over 100 and odd tickets, 160, I think it was in the end, which is pretty good for a stream. They were profiled and they had been on a label, but, they'd had a long career and they were mainly a grassroots artist based in Brighton. So we did it ticketed, we did it through YouTube, we uploaded it onto our channel, and the whole sort of process of ticketing where we had to put it through OBS, which is a sort of broadcasting connection between really, the filmed element and the kind of broadcast element. And once we had like a link, a stream link, we sent that off to the ticketing company, and it could be shared. So we had to be really careful about just getting it to the ticketing company before they clocked off for the day, but enough time for them to get it to the audience members. And as you can probably tell, it probably was shared quite a lot, which is why we've got quite a lot of views, because we got, a handful of people who really came on and saw it. But I kind of see this as an important element of streaming, really, because what it does offer is a really good video, a good reflection on the artist's live performance. And as a promoter, when I'm always trying to persuade, and I always am, because I think as a regional promoter, you should have that interaction with the local scene and be supporting them. I'm always trying to persuade agents who are booking the headline shows with me to have a local artist on there. And, there's usually a video on the artist's Facebook where it's kind of shaky, hope and ruin scenario where the audio is really bad. So it's nice for them to have this opportunity to have a really good bit of visual, filmed work that was well produced. And a couple of the artists went on to do really well out of it. One of them went on to play Mutations Festival, Jen, and Sea Dog got a festival in France through being able to show these kind of videos. So what we're going to do now is just play the film. Do I just click along, Chris? Yeah. So this is a film where it's Chris, who's here from Inner Strings, who did the filming, and also Matt, who did the sound and the editing, just talking about their experience. And I was there as well. And you'll see some clips of the 7 streams that we did. One was in person as well. It was a hybrid event. And unfortunately, or fortunately, because he's quite cute, you wonder what I'm going to say now. My friend's little dog was there as well. And that's why I was out of the picture, because it was the only time we could film. So there's a little bit of barking, but I'm sure you can cope.
Yeah, I was robbing pieces just to eat them back at Charlie's house. No access is given unless you part of the crew. You didn't know, I thought you knew, like, I thought you knew.
It ain't you, it's just how it is. Girl, I wish I could change things.
Sunrise, so I open my eyes. Reflections catch me by surprise. Sometimes you've got to cleanse your mind. Yeah.
Could I just ask you to introduce yourself and just say what you did in terms of the 7 streams we did at St George's over the summer?
I filmed, edited and did the lighting.
I recorded all the sound and mixed and edited the audio that we got for the broadcasts.
So in terms of the streams that we did, 6 were pre-recorded and the 7th was again pre-recorded, but it was also a hybrid event. It was in person as well.
Well, we took the decision quite early on to film, edit and then stream, because felt it would be a much better quality product. We just sort of decided on that quite early on. But the learning process was quite a learning process, you know, the business of talking to the musicians and making sure they knew exactly what was going on, and then just having cameras in the right place. You know, there's quite a steep learning curve, but I think, you know, we got somewhere really professional by the end of it.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel that the sort of setting add to it as well, and the fact that we could edit it.
Yeah.
I think if it had been, you know, something live, although, you know, live you do expect things to go wrong, but I think that we were just given an opportunity to just have this really well-produced body of work.
Well, it also it made a big difference having, you know, we could have a smaller team by doing this, because if you're streaming live, you need someone to look after the stream and to make sure things don't go wrong.
And if you are kind of like using a sort of smaller team, it does sort of cost less as well, because, you know, I would say on average the kind of average stream for us to be able to do sort of cost over £1,000 with all the hire of the church and your time and the sort of production that went into it. What are your sort of feelings on stream shows? One thing I was thinking of with the camera angle is, you know, when you go to a gig, you can't see various camera angles. You see one view unless you move around a lot. And if it's a sold out gig, that's going to be quite impossible, really. So, I mean, a stream, I sort of feel, has to be quite different to a live show in order for it to be appealing to people. It needs to have a bit more value.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think almost the way forward is almost maybe like a sort of online sort of magazine show kind of format or something, where you're showcasing artists but not trying to make it a replacement for a live event because it can't be. And I thought it was interesting with the St George's show because you had some wide shots and stuff. It was very, very apparent that it wasn't a live gig, and it kind of made a feature of that, of having this amazing space,
Yeah.
and the fact that it wasn't people there, you know,
Yeah,
the artists
yeah.
did it. Which,
I mean, it's quite difficult to replace the live gig scenario because people like to be in the room with other people, you know, watching stuff. It's like the communal spirit of it. But, you know, I do believe that there is a room for streaming. You know, people can't always go to shows. Some people are isolating still, you know, and would still like to go. So, you know, they're still...
Yeah. Or underage, or just not able to get out through, you know, being too old. Or
would like to watch something at their leisure, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are your sort of thoughts on sort of 5G? Have you got any thoughts? I mean, it would give hopefully the opportunity for artists from different parts of the world to kind of work together in one live event.
Yeah, I mean, like any sort of streaming, there are so many variables. You know, you need to have a really strong team pulling everything together, making sure things run smoothly. And, you know, like live streaming, that there are so many variables where things can go wrong.
Yeah.
So you need to have a good team, and what I've seen of 5G so far, it does need tidying up a little bit.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it, Matt?
I think it's quite exciting, the idea that the latency will be low enough that people can kind of interact in real time over distance, because obviously that's not really been a thing until now.
No.
No matter how much online collaboration goes on, there's always a sense of things being sent backwards and forwards. So I think it's quite exciting if that can be made fast enough that things do actually occur in real time.
I mean, it may be something that means that certain artists can afford, certain session musicians, they don't have to be on tour with them and they have to be paid for the visas and the travel and all that kind of thing.
Right, sure.
That, you can have like a drummer in a different country who's just in a studio each night for when you do the gig.
Yeah. No, that could be a whole new thing, I guess, of just sort of collaborative performances by people who physically would find it quite difficult to make a schedule where they can collaborate. And perform, but do it in that kind of a way. So.
Yeah, older artists who don't want to tour anymore, and maybe there's a sort of environmental impact thing.
Yeah, for sure.
As well.
Reduction of air travel and
was there anything else that you wanted to sort of finally say about it? I know, Chris, you learned from maybe using a stronger sort of connection in order to be able to not have jarring on the first stream that we did.
Yeah. I mean, the first stream that we did was on my laptop, which is still quite a powerful laptop. But just using Wi-Fi, we discovered that you get dropouts very much more easily, and I had to do a lot of research. I'm not from the world of streaming. I'm from the world of live visuals, so I had to do a lot of research, trial and error, and unfortunately where I live in Lewis, the internet's not very good at all. So they're trying to discover what the problem was. I had to do it somewhere where there's a decent internet connection. So but we used an Ethernet cable, and I had to use my iMac, which has got a much more powerful processor, and everything runs smoothly after that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts for you, Matt? Is it a world that you like working in?
It was very much a world I enjoyed working in, actually. It was really nice to just have that environment where you have artists performing and yourself documenting it, and without the surrounding sort of palaver of an audience. As much as I love live events, of course, but it was a very interesting thing to do, and it was lovely to have that opportunity at a time when pretty much all other work had dried up for people in live events. So it was a great lifeline and a great opportunity to try something new and to mix things in a more controlled way, to mix them after the show in a sort of studio environment. And it was very interesting and exciting opportunity, really. So.
It was also nice to bridge the gap with the last one we did, which was the hybrid show, where we actually had a live audience in there, and that's a nice way to sort of to end it, really. Yeah.
Did you find that a challenge, more of a challenge? Or?
Well, it's had its limitations with the cameras for a start.
Yeah.
But apart from that, no. Yeah.
Well, thanks ever so much for being part of it. I don't think we could have really done it without the Arts Council funding, just because there wasn't as, the take-up you get in terms of people, buying tickets. I think at the grassroots level, people definitely expect it to be free. So it was quite difficult charging for it and getting an audience, especially with it being summertime as well, because by the time we applied for the money, that's when it all sort of came through and we had to do it. But it's definitely a great sort of body of work. It's not something at the moment that's very financially viable for a promoter, but it's a great sort of body of work for the artists and for us to experience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So it was a fantastic opportunity, and it was good to sort of explore different genres as well, because I'm not really known for hip-hop and rap, and it was good to work with Audio Active on that, so it gave me the opportunity as a programmer to sort of be more diverse in my programming, really. Just a few sort of afterthoughts in terms of the sort of future of streaming. I do definitely think there's a real gap in terms of where the industry's at and what they will accept at the moment. So, I did expect to come back and have some of my sold-out shows streamed, because lots of venues got the cultural refunding, and they bought the technology in order to sort of stream shows, but it wasn't something the agent wanted to do. And you do, I suppose, have to have enough streams in order to cover the whatever extra cost it is to use that streaming material and equipment. So it's very much, the Nick Caves and the Laura Marlins of this world who seem to have made it successful, but that kind of probably, excluded the promoter. They could go straight to the agent and just deal with the kind of roles who knew how to technically do it. And then, the grassroots artists, which is really positive, are able to utilise it quite quickly, because maybe they didn't have an agent, so they didn't have to go through, agents during lockdown for the middle section of the industry, the sort of 300 or 200 capacity artists who could pull that amount of people to 1,000. Potentially they just thought, no, let's wait until we come back, and then the agent can kind of make more money from it, maybe. It may be that Spotify decide to increase their charges every month and have an element to what they offer in terms of stream shows. And I think that could be quite good to build a new audience. So there is definitely an audience out there in terms of, if we think about where much younger people are, maybe they live in places where there isn't this whole infrastructure like we have on our doorstep in Brighton, and they are used to this virtual world. They're used to communicating to their friends who live up the road in another room over games. So why cannot the live music industry be introduced to them, and then eventually, hopefully, that leads on to them coming in person when they're old enough. Also, like Chris said, and it's been said before, maybe the audience is people who are housebound or who are older. It's maybe a new audience rather than the present audience who go see live. We also just touched upon 5G in that interview, and it could potentially make touring cheaper. But I was talking to Matt, who's an artist, as well as a festival programmer, about, how would it work? How would the artist feel? I think it'd take a lot of getting used to having your drummer in, say, America, and then you're touring around Europe. But, to tour now and all the costs of visas is expensive. I think it costs, if you're a European artist going to America, about £1,000 per head, for the visa. And it could be a future career for sort of older artists who no longer want to tour but would like to make an appearance within someone else's tour. They're all sort of thoughts really on how, because it's a bit of an unknown, isn't it, on how streaming is going to end up, where we're going to be with it. So thanks for listening. Like I say, you can look at the videos that we had of the grassroots artists on Facebook, and also I'm going to stream all the St George's performances over Christmas when people are hopefully not locked down but at home and have a bit more time on their hands. Thanks for listening.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Anna Mawson. And now he has travelled up today from the deepest southwest to be with us. So we're very lucky to have him. Matthew Shaw is here, one of the co-organisers of the exceptional Sea Change Festival. The floor is yours, Matthew.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. So Sea Change Festival, for those who don't know, was founded in 2016 out of a record shop called Drift, which is at the top of the High Street in Totnes in Devon. And it sort of started out of in-stores, so, providing bands that are on tour or record launches in the record shop and for local bands. But it started in the town. We started putting things on in the Civic Hall, in pubs, in the church, different venues around the town. So it was this multi-venue approach. And it was great, but it was very small venues. So by year 3, we Also took the approach of hiring a site, a place called Dartington Hall, which is up the hill, and it meant we could actually have something that felt like a real summer festival with people camping and bigger stages, and it meant people didn't have to queue outside the Barrel House for 40 minutes trying to get in to see a band because it was at capacity. So we're trying to make it a little bit more easy to see the bands. And then 2019, we were due to have the festival, the biggest yet, 1,500 people, all up on the site. We paid all our guarantees out and no insurance, and we were like, right, we've got to the end of March. Doesn't look good. We're one of the first festivals to have to run. We're going to have to pull it. So we pulled it, not really knowing what we were going to do. But after about 3 weeks, we were like, well, that's no good. We can't just sit at home, pretending we could have been at a festival. So we decided to go online, and we decided to go online and make it free. And we asked all of the people that were going to play and all the people that we knew if they wanted to do something too, while also saying we've not really got any money, but we'd like to make something happen because it just feels a bit of a shame, and we never know if we're going to get to do it again. So that's what we asked people, and that's what we decided to do. So I've got a little film that shows some of the footage across the years at Sea Change, starting quite early on, a couple of local news reports as well, that sort of explain a bit more so that I don't have to about what the festival is. And then also it sort of ends with where we are now, which is this hybrid kind of place where we're doing some socially distanced shows, hopefully for a long time to come, or even full capacity gigs, but also with the ability to pivot purely to digital, should we have to. Let's hope not, but should we have to. So let's watch the film, and then hopefully it'll make a bit more sense what I say afterwards.
Totnes and Dartington are turning themselves into a festival site for the next 2 days as the Sea Change Festival comes to town.
In 2 years, it has brought in £1 million to the town's economy. And tonight, John Henderson is at the third bash. John.
Hi there. Yeah, you just might be able to make out Totnes Castle over my shoulder. It's probably about the only venue in the whole of Totnes that isn't playing host to any music over the next 2 days. It really is a big festival. It's a huge sellout. Probably about 2,000 people coming. Probably going to bring in about £500,000 to the town. A big kicker to a lot of people. The bank holiday weekend, the last hurrah of the summer, and South Devon is looking and sounding good. Totnes and its Sea Change Festival, scores of performances over 2 days at 4 venues, the newest of which on the Dartington Hall estate, still very much a work in progress, with only hours to go until the first act. This is known as the offshore stage, and it's just about a mile from Totnes. The question is, will people come from there to here? 2 wheels, arguably the best way to get about if the weather holds. If not, spare a thought for those hardy festival campers.
Totnes and Dartington are beautiful places. The music is cutting edge, definitely.
It's a good mix, yeah.
The festival was born at this specialist record shop 3 years ago, providing a live outlet to musicians and a hit not to be sniffed at for traders.
In the first 2 years, we've generated over £1 million for the local economy in terms of accommodation, hospitality, when people are eating and drinking. So, yeah, it's a nice responsibility to have, but we feel like we've helped with the profile a little. Certainly got people to come to a big party once a year.
And for 2,000 people, the parties started. This Red River dialect with the early slot at the Civic Hall, the Stone's Throw Away, Hilang Child, packing the pews at St Mary's Church. And around the corner, queuing for the third venue, the Barrel House pub, with readings and recitals.
I love it here. Very kind of left field, very cool, you know. We're stood outside an art gallery called the Bowie Gallery, you know. I like the vibe here.
A vibe that's entertaining all year round.
Cell phones off, vibrators on.
What I'm doing is just enjoying myself, really. I come and see my dear friend Mark Stewart.
You know,
and his little mate Gareth. Where is he? Sorry.
I think they're just getting ready to play here in 25 minutes. Yeah.
You know, with Lee Perry, right? He's one of these people you meet people who've interviewed and they go, "Oh, he's mad. He did this and he did that." People that I've interviewed that people have said are difficult, like Rocky Erickson from the 13th Elevators or
Most
Mark
fun,
Smith.
probably, all of them.
Well, I got the idea that it was easier for them to behave like that as a way of not having their time wasted or getting asked stupid questions. And actually, they were much less difficult if you asked them something they were interested in.
And one of your projects that you're working on at the moment is Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death.
Yeah, I've been working on a project, Mrs. Death, for the last 3 years. Mrs. Death is a novel where Death is a woman, and Death makes friends with a young writer who's close to death and walks around London and around the world and through time, talking about different deaths, violent deaths, quiet deaths, secret deaths, and all the stories that Mrs. Death remembers. And the writer tries to write the memoirs of death and has all these conversations. It's been an empowering thing to write death as a woman. When you write death as a woman, you suddenly find that you're writing very much about all the inequality and all the violence that is happening in the world. In wars, it's children and women that go down first, and in so many ways.
For nearly a century, Dartington's been a centre of creative activity where the arts are celebrated and people come together to create, to think, to talk, to educate and to inspire. So this is the Great Hall.
It is, and it's absolutely steeped in heritage.
But now it's thinking about the future and how it can build on foundations laid in the past.
We naturally draw on the heritage, but it informs our future. But we can't just rest on the past, so hence why we're doing things like introducing and hosting Sea Change here. Not just bringing a festival to our wonderful landscape, but actually welcoming them to these incredible heritage spaces.
With its centenary approaching, Dartington is now looking to the future and trying to find new purposes for these old places. Sea Change partnered with Dartington for the first time last year. This year, the festival is spreading from the fields into some of the buildings on the estate. Places like High Cross House, a modernist masterpiece built in the 1930s, but fading fast as it waits for renovation.
With the Great Hall, we're not going to put a rock band in there or we'll make the windows fall out. And I think in a building like this, we have to kind of book things that are conducive to the space. But the hope for us is that during the weekend, somebody will look around at the buildings and think that this is somewhere that is a really kind of quite a privilege to be spending time, regardless of who's kind of talking to you or what you're witnessing.
Sea Change is at the end of May, Dartington hoping it'll help root this 14th century estate in the 21st century. Duncan Slightholme, BBC Spotlight, Dartington.
sit and wonder why I've been everything you don't know by now. Ain't no use for to sit and wonder why I've been. It'll never do somehow. As your rooster crows at the break of dawn, look out your window and I'll be gone. You're the reason I'm traveling. in turning on your light, babe. A light I never know. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. I'm on the dark side of the road. Well, I wish there was something you could do or say to try and make me change my mind and stay. But we never did too much talking anyway. Don't think twice, it's alright. Hey!
Hello, virtual Sea Change attendees. Sea Change virtual attendees? I don't know. I'm Dana from Porridge Radio, and I'm going to sing a bunch of songs for you. This one is called Nephews.
So you can see the difference between where we were heading to go before you saw the festival site. There's not really anyone there, and we're not going to be able to do it. And it's quite a sort of heartbreaking moment. Everyone recognises that because no one in this room was unaffected by that moment in time, and we weren't quite sure if we'd ever be back. But actually, it offered an opportunity that we weren't expecting, no one was really expecting, and we're really glad we did it. We actually ran the online festival with just two of us. I was sat at home in Dorset, Rupert was sat at home in Devon. We both had one laptop each, trying to keep everyone else off the Wi-Fi so we could upload things live as we were going. Most of things were planned in advance, but lots of last-minute things came in as the excitement grew around what was going on. So yeah, 1,500 to 2,000 people, as the guy from Southwest today was saying. But we had no idea how many people were going to come online because we didn't do tickets. We just said it's going to be free. Here's the website link. Come along and join us. Over that weekend, 24th to 25th of April 2020, we had 30,000 visitors to the site, really helped by The Guardian writing a piece that went live Saturday night about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock that was going to go in print in The Observer. And Laura Barton wrote a piece that gave us a 5-star review saying a swell of congregation in a new nowhere. And that's how it felt. It felt like all of a sudden loads of people were joining in, having a conversation on live. It felt almost like a gig, probably more in the evening after people had had a few drinks, but it really did feel more like being able to commune with people, meet new friends, hear new music you'd never heard before. and to get some of that sense of excitement that's possible at a festival. And we did that by relying really on existing platforms. We couldn't build a website from scratch that would do all of the hosting. So we used Bandcamp, we used Mixcloud, we used Spotify, we did a Tim's listening party with the Breeders on the Saturday night as a headliner, and they came, so it was like having the Breeders headliners, really. You know, and I think what happened then as a result was just a huge amount of engagement, 479,000 Twitter impressions over the 2 days. And just lots of people getting involved and saying, yeah, this is really good, I'm really glad you bothered to do something, and I hope you're going to be all right, I hope you're going to be able to keep your houses, you know, and keep going and come back next year. So people were just very supportive. So that's what we did over that weekend, and then lots of people got in touch and said, we'd love you to help us with what we're doing, or we'd love for you to look at, or to have a chat with us about how we might be able to run live events for my band or for my venue or whatever it was, really. And the next thing we did was in June, there was an event that came up called Love Record Stores, which was in response to Record Store Day being cancelled, or at least postponed until later in the year. Lots of independent record shops really worried about how they're making sales. And so Beggars and Pias said, let's put something together for all the independent labels. And then Rupert and I augmented that schedule. So we ran a 48-hour live stream. And democratisation of the festival really came to life there, like Anna was talking about that before, with different size acts. So we had like Craig David, Elton John, who else? Just these like Robin, you know, like massive pop acts that were headlining, but we also would then say to Richard Norris, do you want to do a 2-hour, you know, live set of your music for healing? And we had sort of local bands, small unsigned bands, and people that we were just really into or excited about, and all of them existed on the same bill. And it's possible to do that. No one really blinked an eye. Everyone was just happy that it was programmed with interesting things. And because of the labels and the record stores, you know, because this was to help sell stock, you know, all of the bands involved, the bigger bands, they were all selling vinyl, special editions like Record Store Day. So because of the labels' involvement as well, it showed what you can do with very similar setup, 2 of us and a social media team at Beggars helping. So that one we reached 635,000 impressions on Twitter in the first 24 hours, 1.2 million from March to June, 375,000 impressions March to June 2020, 465 million views on TikTok, and 865,000 views on the Love Record Store's account, and that website's still up. So, you know, the numbers were all of a sudden just phenomenal, and it was the same setup as me and Rupert running some of what you just saw, really. And you can see, I wanted to show the video because some people just said, I want to play a live stream, and I'll just set my guitar up, I'll put Zoom on, and I'll play. And other people really spent a lot of time editing together visuals and almost like making a music video or a short film or conversations. The other thing that was really important for us was the hybrid model, not just hybrid between online and live, but also hybrid between different art forms and different forms of culture. So yes, live bands playing or people doing acoustic sets, but lots of literature, lots of arts, lots of conversations about cultural you know, topics, and just, you know, hearing a bit more about people and what makes them tick alongside, you know, a live set from Black Country New Road, or like yesterday, one of the bands that we highlighted in 2019 just signed, and just helping them to get a first gig when they couldn't have done it in that same time period. It would have been very difficult to get seen. So there's a great opportunity for collaboration between all kinds of different organisations and people, is what I'm saying, really. So I think it's worth speaking to people in all kinds of different sectors and finding out what you can do together from the world of literature and music and culture generally, and not just try and do everything on your own because it's just so hard. So maybe work with other people a bit. It's a lot more fun. And so where that left us now is we are doing some socially distanced live gigs again, and that's a different financial model for us. So it's doing it as bundles of album sales and sort of in-store, out-store things. The last show was Damon Albarn playing in that same church to 200 people 2 weeks ago. And it's a new way. We're having to find new business models and new ways of actually making this work and finding ways of keeping going. But we will be back in the May Bank holiday weekend next year, all being well. Omicron and whatever else is coming our way accepted. So, and we'll be announcing something more around that next week. But yeah, I think my main point is the collaboration and the hybrid across all different ways of thinking about what you're going to do with live events is the way forward, I believe. So, thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Can I ask? I don't need to ask because they're on their way. Anna and Matthew to join us up on the chairs. So we're going to take questions or comments from you lovely people. There's a microphone being passed around, being brought to you. So if you have a question, please wait for the microphone. It may smell of cleansing fluid because it's going to get wiped in between each of you.
Good.
Do you have a question? What's your question?
I have a question about
That's fine.
about the curation of the actual festival. So when you're normally doing your curation, did you find that was different when you started going online? Did you use a different process?
Yes, is this on? Is it working? Yeah, actually.
It was lovely to see a very brief shot of Big Jeff in there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's always fun, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the worst things that Brighton lacks in the music world is we don't have a Big Jeff. Oh, Melita's our Big Jeff, is she? I wonder if she'd enjoy that. So Bristol has an Uber music fan who's become a legendary figure who's been going to gigs for 15 years and dancing at the front, regardless of what kind of music it is, and is a kind of totemic figure in Bristol's music scene. Big Jeff, he's a wonderful guy who recently has become a visual artist in his early middle age and is a brilliant painter. But yeah, so maybe Melita is our Big Jeff. That's a lovely thought. Melita's not here, so we can say that.
Yeah, that's very good.
I'll tell her about the live stream and she can decide what she thinks about being the Big Jeff. Are you audible?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
that's
brilliant.
good. Yeah,
so
cool.
to return to the question.
Yeah. It did change somewhat because not everybody was ready. Not everyone was ready for that first festival with it, 2 months after we started. But the bit I forgot to say that was really important is we did used to do physically a lot of local band programming within that, and I did say about sort of unsigned acts and smaller acts when we did the larger events. But we did give a lot of support as well to people in terms of you can just film yourself and send it in and we'll edit it for you. And it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be as sort of rough and ready as you like, as long as you're happy with it and the performance. That's fine. And some people really just wanted to go live, and they weren't too bothered about what microphones they had. They just set a laptop up. But that was probably the main drawback. And I think, it's difficult. You have to remember that in April, people were still saying festivals were happening. I think Glastonbury were even still saying up until quite around that time that it's still going to happen. And people were still saying Reading and Leeds was going to happen, So we were like, do we cancel? What do we do? We just had no idea. No one knew what was coming. And I think some people were holding out as well, maybe we will be all right by August 2020. But it wasn't to be. So we had to adapt, but not massively.
Do you have an answer to that question, Anna, about curating? Has it changed the kind of artists you put on?
It's made me think a bit more about the breadth of artists that are in Brighton, and just reconnect with the local scene and establish new relationships, yeah. I would like to have the opportunity to sort of diversify a bit more, and that did give me that. So I feel like I'm at the, early stages of, reconsidering maybe what I do with Melting Vinyl and Matthew was saying, just, you know, the sort of, it's quite a broken business model being a promoter, as you all know, Chris, as well. You know, it's just, you are financially very responsible for everything. You pay for everything as a freelance promoter if no one turns up still, and you make money and you lose money, and sometimes you break even. So I think that maybe I need to, and this is something that Donna Close, as she's in the room, has been going on at me for a long time to do, is to, you know, there is funding out there, and now that they've opened up and recognised promoters and the importance of promoters as well as venues during lockdown, that, you know, we have got funding open to us, and I think that I'm going to need funding if I'm going to sort of experiment a bit more. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Yeah, so we won't worry about the microphone. No, it's all right. Keep the microphone. If you say, ask your, yeah, if you ask it, and then I'll repeat it for the benefit of the people watching the stream.
All right, no worries. I guess I have a question about the Eventbrite on Hannah at St George's, which looked amazing to showcase like such a special venue. But I was wondering, I guess if you hadn't had that personal relationship that was pre-existing with the venue, how do you think they would have approached your proposal to put the gig on? I'm wondering what's in it for the venues if they can't sell refreshments and have people in it. What is the biggest sort of attraction for them to put on something that essentially is going to still cost money to run?
I mean, that is a great question. So, what's in it for the venues? Presumably, it is a large portion of the venue's interest is that they can then sell booze or do a franchising sort of thing. And we all know the slightly controversial thing of venues charging a percentage of artists' merch take as well to sort of help their bottom line. What's in it for them if there's no audience showing up?
Yeah, I mean, the St George's got a higher fee, but it wasn't the same amount of money that they would have got if there'd been, you know, well, the one hybrid show we did, they did get the money that they would normally get because there was a live audience in there, and it's per, you know, how many people are in the buildings, how they charge. So obviously we had to sort of negotiate, you know, this kind of higher fee, which, you know, wasn't a lot of money, and it was probably a fifth of what they normally get. The church historically doesn't rely on the sort of bar sales. They rely on just the higher, you know. So, but I think I would have always chosen an unusual space, because as a promoter, as a female promoter, I've always been looking for my own identity in terms of a venue that I connect with, and the sort of churches and galleries and unusual spaces that I've always loved working in hasn't got a lot of history of, you know, previous promoters, and as a female promoter I felt I could go in there and stamp my own mark really on it, and, you know, wasn't going into a well-used Brighton venue. There's nothing wrong with those, but I just felt like I had more ownership on it in an industry when you don't have a lot of ownership on the, you know, the way you can be as a female promoter. Yeah, but it is a conundrum, isn't it? It's like, you know, if we do go into another lockdown, which hopefully we won't, you know, how do the venues make money? And I think most of them are surviving off government handouts, aren't they, Arts Council? And, you know, I wouldn't have been able to do that without Arts Council funding. You know, it was a few £100s we made out of the sort of streaming and the sort of tickets when we did the hybrid event. So yeah, it's like working out how you create a future with that when you want a backdrop of a lovely venue. That's a good point.
Just out of curiosity, to follow up on that, did the venue expect a percentage of any of the ticket sales?
No, and I think they'll probably have enough to sort of buy some tea for the refreshment area with it. You know, I'm just sort of getting my head around having to pay PRS because, you know, there was a big fuffle, wasn't there, with PRS, where they just sort of went in and during lockdown and sort of said, right, we're going to charge you 8% now on your gross income. And normally with live shows where you've got no more opportunity to sell tickets, it's 4.2%. So people were like, we're hardly earning any money anyway from this. So they did a sort of sliding scale deal, but, you know, on some of the shows there was, you know, less than 100 being earned from it, and I'm having to pay PRS like 25 quid per show. for the license for it, you know, because that's what you pay. I think if it's under 100, 500 income. So yeah, the economies aren't great with streaming, so it does really work at that high end with the Nick Caves and the Laura Marlings, really, more than the sort of grassroots end. But, you know, as an artist, you can, if you've, you know, a bit tech savvy, you can come up with something quite good, and it not cost you a lot of money. It probably cost us around, I think I said in the film, about just over $1,000 to do each stream. It's paying the artist, me for producing it, Chris and Matt for, you know, filming it and editing it, and a bit of marketing. Normally a St George's show, it would be, with the hire and the artist fee, probably something like $8,000 or something like that to stage a show there, if you've got a real high-end artist and a big fee. So yeah.
Anyone?
Question to both of you. As live music returns and hopefully will stay return, do you think there'll be a turn-off in interest for watching streaming from audiences, or if some of the artists you're working with still creating their own online content and getting engagement?
So this is a really fascinating question because it could go either way, couldn't it? So you're asking about streaming interest tailing off once we are back to gigging, but it could also be the availability and the ubiquity of streams, meaning that interest in live music tails off. I wonder if you'd speak to both of those. Do you think either of those is a risk?
Yeah, well, it definitely is. You know, I was doing quite a lot of educational programming at the same, you know, over the last 12 months, 18 months as well, and definitely saw, you know, a real Zoom fatigue kicking in, especially in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, actually, in terms of sign-ups. And actually, at the end of spring, you know, the weather was quite good. Everyone was thinking, well, we can get outside at least. Lockdown, there was whispers of lockdowns easing and that. And I think that everyone has a bit of optimism going into the summer. Perhaps it's different now that it's autumn. There's a little bit of reticence and worry again back in the air. So perhaps it is a good time again for online. But I think the difference for me between the things that suffered from that and the ones that didn't was those things that created their own brand as such, or created their own community, more so than the word brand, in fact. So, you know, what happened with Tim Burgess's listening parties, what happened with something like the Heavenly Social, they had online drinks at 6 p.m. every night, and people would go every night at 6 p.m, probably drinking every night at 6 p.m, worrying about whatever furlough ending. But it did mean that you could go along and take a punt on something and join other people that probably will be there most nights and have a chat. So it was a bit like an old school message board in the early days. You might have some familiar faces just to have a chat with. And so I think where there's a community, and that's what we found with Sea Change, where people were just interested in anything, pretty much, and or at least show some sort of generosity of curiosity towards anything. It was much easier than when you're just trying to sell each thing separately every single time, which would then rely on each individual act probably self-promoting much harder than they ever had to pre-online events. That's how it felt for me.
Your question was about sort of the future of streaming and whether it's got any mileage. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, whether your audiences will sustain when face-to-face is back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the streaming side has got a lot of work to do, and they've got to, you know, have some other offer there that makes it very different from the live show. You know, whether that be a sort of Q&A or, you know, being able to see into the well-known artist room or whatever, because some people like that, didn't they? But I think that it is just a new project and it needs a new audience, and that audience isn't the people who go to live shows. So, you know, it probably does need some funding in order to sort of develop it further. But I think, you know, the lockdown hopefully has taught us a bit of more empathy and a bit more kind of consideration, I hope. And, you know, there are whole swathes of people who are either growing up without live music and access to sort of culture, and because they maybe grow up in towns where these things aren't happening, and, you know, or they are, you know, people who are, you know, more homebound or, you know, neurodiverse and really just don't want the bright lights and the loud music, you know. So, you know, home entertainment is a real threat to live music and to, you know, kids growing up. I've got sort of nieces and nephews who live in Dewsbury, and there's no live scene there, and you know, only one of them's really into music, and you know, they've got me as an auntie, and it's appalling. But you know, during lockdown, they've been growing up within that sort of home entertainment vibe, not experiencing what I experienced, where I wanted to go out and go to, you know, live music nearby, or go to major towns and see it. So it is a real concern, but you know, it could be, you know, there could be a real development through this whole channel of, you know, young people being on games and talking to their friends, and you know, maybe being an avatar that goes into a venue and watch something. You know, there's certainly all soundtracks and music that go along with these games, so they are learning about live music and recorded music, aren't they, through that? So yeah, so I do think it's just a whole new market, and it needs developing really, and probably funding to make it happen.
Charlie in the charming Christmas jumper.
1st of December. I was going to say, I feel like there's a paradox between promoters wanting control of a product, audio-visual text wanting something to be perfect and technically brilliant for the punters, and therefore their conclusion being, we've got to record it and then edit it and then deliver it, and therefore it's no longer live, and therefore the paradox is that the punters want something live, they want the immediacy of a gig, and has this been your experience that punters have gone, it was not live, so why do I care? You're premiering it at a certain time, so what? It's not actually live. The other aspect of that, I think, is because people are getting more used to watching performances on Reddit, watching performances on Twitch, where not only do you have something live, you have actual interaction with the person. You can write to them, and they see it straight away, and they can reply. That's amazing, and that's unique to streaming. I think you don't really get that unless you're someone like Chris who chats to the audience when they're performing, you know, which is another whole thing that not everybody wants to get involved in. Can you talk about this a bit? Was this your experience from a punter's point of view? Has there been any research from audiences to see what they actually want from this?
Thanks, Anna. I don't know about research, but from the experience of doing those events, we definitely found that probably the bigger the acts actually, or it gave an opportunity for people that don't have that live dynamic in a conventional way, people that might be sort of more like home producers, for example, to be able to put something together that was really spectacular to watch and to engage with. And the pre-edited versions of that were way more interesting often than some of the things we did, which was someone in a studio with a camera in the corner. It was just, you know, often a bloke nodding to his own tunes sort of thing. You know, it's like some of it built really well and sonically was amazing, but it really wasn't that much to look at if you weren't in a live venue with all of the lights and the live visuals. And some of the things I liked the best were the really raw things, where it was absolutely live and you could tell there was no tech at all, and it really benefited from that. And for fans, that's really magical. And you have got that, like, oh, they're about to start. It is a little bit like the same feeling as lights going down in the venue and the lights coming on stage. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's probably more about how you're best going to represent what it is you do as an artist. Yeah, how can you best get that across? Because now you have got the opportunity of, like you said, pre-editing everything, making it all perfect, even overdubbing, you know, and sort of cheating about how you're playing, if you like. But probably everyone always did that with live albums anyway. I don't know. But yeah, you are right. It is really difficult to see what that would be like for the future, because I think it is a bit of a shame, isn't it, when you think you're watching a live band live and you want that interaction, and yet you can't have it because it happened 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
I mean, I'd probably say exactly what you were going to say, really. I mean, it sounds like you just really prefer to be in a live gig as well, because it feels more authentic and tangible.
Yeah, I think that's true, but there's also, it makes you ask quite big questions about what you need from a gig, what you actually want from being in the room. And, you know, we were talking on Friday about Kraftwerk, who have basically replaced the whole band. So they really care. No, it's still amazing, you know. So you can go to a gig and go, well, none of the actual people are there, or they sort of are, but does that actually matter? And so if you take that to its conclusion, then everyone can be at home, and maybe it doesn't matter at all. Then everyone needs a lighting rig in their neck.
The ABBA project, the current revival of ABBA, has come up on every one of these events because of that obviously they're getting away with, or doing the clever thing of touring a band that isn't ABBA and people are incredibly excited about it, and the world is ready for it. We're almost out of time. Do we have any final questions? Yeah, at the back. Well, that's fascinating simply because we've, through this series of events, have been just music industry people. And in some ways, what you're saying is completely right, that the very siloed cultural worlds, as it was before COVID, seem to be, to me at least, to be equally siloed now. We didn't suddenly become interdisciplinary in a maybe it is happening and we're not seeing it, but do you have... Have I missed something there? That's a great question.
I totally agree. Of course, with that multidisciplinary thing. High Cross House that you saw in one of the news footages, it's this crumbling, Art Deco building. When we went in there and looked around it had been disused for a while, but it was such an amazing place. And there was this framed photograph leaning up on a wall of John Cage in there teaching, from years ago. And what really excited us there is let's put in, rough trade books are a thing right from the beginning, programming arts and literature. White Rabbit books now programming music-specific literature, but actually having collaborative opportunities between different forms of art is huge in that space. That's all it's about, really, and putting people in spaces they wouldn't normally operate in. So the more of that, the better, I think. Definitely, I would definitely push for things like that.
I think that was more a question for Matt, but you sort of talked about, the building and as being in the mix as well as the art form, and I think we really got that with St George's. It was about, this beautiful background of where, the arts originally sort of came from, which is, people did used to go. It was their first place years and years ago to see the arts was in the churches. So, it was great to have those long shots and just bring the building into it, because I always get that kind of feedback from people that whenever they've been in there, that they sort of feel that it adds to the, the actual performance as well. And it was just nice for artists who don't normally experience a performance there to be able to do that. They usually are playing, well, the majority of them are playing in studios or, grassroots venues. So I would have thought that would have been a real, plus for them as well as us as the viewer.
Sadly, we are out of time. We've overrun slightly. One final thing, how would people who are interested in following up get in touch with you guys and find out more about what you're up to? This is your chance to plug your websites, basically.
We could be here for some time. So multivinyl.co.uk, and on the website there's a way you can contact me as well, whether it's just a general inquiry or an artist inquiry. Thanks for listening.
And visit Sea Change Presents website or Instagram and Twitter, mostly on social media. Get in touch. Love to chat about any ideas anyone's got for things they'd like to do. So Sea Change Presents, find us, say hello. Don't be shy, people at home. Thanks.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to Phil Jones for interviewing Michael Williams for us and for hosting this whole shebang in his house. Thank you very much, Anna Moulson and Matthew Shaw. It's been really great to do this. Thank you very much, you, for coming along and being part of this thing. This is the final of the events here. I think we've got an event in the new year that will be at the Dome that's more of a demo experience, trialing out some of the stuff, particularly some of the immersive tech that we were talking about in previous events. And then there will be obviously the final 5G festival experience in March 2022, Omicron willing. We will all gather there, and I think that we will keep you in touch with those events. So hopefully that's okay. So we will tell you when we know the details of those. I'm Chris Thorpe Tracy. You can find me at bordercrossing.substack.com, where I'm do things. Thank you very much, everyone here at the Fusebox, for helping out. Thank you, Chris Chowan, for running the tech. Thank you, Reefa Thorpe Tracy and Anna Bagley, for hosting us. If you love this space has residencies. You can come and it's like a co-op space, particularly for creative technologists. If you're interested in finding out more or getting a tour of some of the amazing tech they have here, speak to Chris Chowan afterwards, or Phil Jones if he's still around, and they can arrange a tour for you. It is a really brilliant place to be. Also, the live stream of this event will be going up on the Wired Sussex YouTube channel probably sometime tomorrow. So if you want to catch up or share it with other people or comment on it, you're welcome to do so. And you can find, obviously, details of all the various events that happen here at Wired Sussex website, which is, I think, wiredsussex.com. And then also, finally, look out for the 5G festival in March. And we're out. Thank you so much. Take care. Good night.
you.